In this video, we're going to be tackling the steering torque sensor on my S2000. It's been problematic for a number of years, and it needs to be fixed. And so, after procrastinating for a long time, it's time to get this thing done. Basically, what's going on is whenever it's cold outside, anything kind of, I guess, below about 65 or so, 65, 60 degrees, it gets really problematic. You could be, when you start up the car, it could jerk to one side when you first start it up and then come back. Or when you try and turn at low speed, it's real juddery and real hard to turn, as though the steering's just not working at all. And so, it needs to be fixed. And so we're going to jump into it this weekend, and I figured in this video I would step by step through how I'm going about to solve this problem. This may or may not be the right way to do this, but I'm going to show you what I'm doing to replace it. Tough to see from the top side, but you can see the torque sensor is right there, coming into the steering rack, and it's right above it is the bottom radiator hose that I think we're going to end up having to remove to get this thing out. So we're going to start looking around and see if we can figure out what's the easiest way to get this out. So as I said, it's tough to see from the top side, but it's beneath these look like AC lines, and then the bottom radiator hose right down there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by removing the air box and get all of this stuff out of the way and see if that's going to give me some room to get in there and work on it. So with the air box removed, you can see it's much easier to get to, but I still have the radiator hose in the way. So I'm draining the antifreeze out of the radiator so I can disconnect that bottom hose and get that out of the way, and then hopefully that'll give me enough room to work and get that removed. There seems to be a set screw right there holding the shaft in place to the steering column, so I need to loosen that up. And then I know there's two bolts on the torque sensor itself holding it in. That bolt on the shaft was to a clamp, not to a set screw, so that just loosens that up so I can get the spline, the top out. The top bolt wasn't too bad, but the bottom bolt was a little bit harder to get to, so I had to put an elbow on the socket and then an extension, and that allowed me to keep the socket square on the head so I wouldn't strip anything and break it free. So I have it loose. There was a second bolt up on the U-joint that I had to remove in order to get it to slide, but I'm still not clearing the housing to get it all the way out, so I've got to figure out that step next. So here's a tip that someone pointed out to me, that this clamp right here that's on the end of the sensor shaft, it's part of that U-joint right there, is on there really tight. It wouldn't come free. So before you remove the bolts on the sensor up here, leave them in, and then use like a pry bar or something to get these get this U-joint off the end of the shaft, because it was on there pretty tight. So here is the old shaft and the new one, and the old one definitely does not turn as easy as the new one does, and if I do a quick turn on it, it makes a squeaking noise and stuff on it. So I think this sensor was definitely bad, and we'll figure out how to get the new one in. It looks like there's going to be some challenges of getting everything lined up right. So when I pulled the old one out, I noticed that the blue dot pin was right in the center of that clamp. So I'm putting this one in back the same way. So hopefully this will get me aligned. Okay, so the new sensor's in. The alignment was off that first time when I tried to put that blue dot in the center, just as the other one was. So I took a slightly different approach. Instead of fighting with it back and forth all the time and trying to get it aligned, I had my wife come and sit in the car and put the steering wheel straight so that it was, and hold it in place straight. I then took the wheels and got them as straight as I possibly could. And then I jiggled the wheel just enough to get those splines on so that everything was still pretty straight when it lined up. And I think I'm good. So the steering wheel is straight. The wheels are pretty straight. And if I bring this around like this, so I can go one turn and just under a half, and I'm pointing at about 7 o'clock. And so if I bring it back to center, the wheels are nice and straight again. And now if I go the other direction, one turn and just under, and I'm pointing about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, something like that. Probably about 4 o'clock. So let's check that again. It should be about straight, one. Okay, and that's about 8 o'clock, not 7 o'clock. So yeah, so those seem pretty square with each other. Okay, knowing what I know now, after that I got everything back together, here's what I would do differently this time around if I had to do it again. First, mark your upper shaft, the steering column shaft, and the top of this U-joint. Put a line there so that way you know how it lines up when everything's straight to go back in. Then loosen and remove that bolt, then loosen and remove that bolt. Then you can pry this U-joint back off the sensor shaft. Then remove the 2 bolts that are holding the sensor in. Okay, the job is done. I got it all put back together and just took it for a test drive. Everything is spot on. I didn't even have to reprogram the steering because I got everything buttoned up and lined up just perfect. So some tips that I would recommend is, one, you can do the job without removing the airbox or the lower radiator hose. You can get in there, but you will fight to get to some of the bolts because some of that stuff is in the way. So removing those things does make the job easier. As I said, my car was due for a radiator flush anyway, so draining it and getting that hose out of the way, was not a big deal. Lining up that steering column shaft with that U-joint on the top piece. That would be helpful when you're putting everything back together so that you can line up those splines right. Now, I'll tell you, if I were doing this job by myself, it would have been a lot more difficult. Having somebody to help you hold that steering wheel straight, dead on, and then lining up those front wheels straight, dead on, and then just jiggling that steering sensor as you pop it in, that will go a long way to keeping everything true. So that it's not wandering and you're not having to pull out and put it in and all of that kind of stuff, take it out, put it back in over and over to get those splines lined up. Just getting those things lined up and then just lightly jiggling that until it slides in, and then the bolts will pull it the rest of the way. That should get you nice and true, on the steering. Mine is spot on. So that's pretty much all there is to this job. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I had been putting this job off for a very long time because I thought it was going to be a much bigger job. Turns out it really wasn't that bad. The other thing is leave the steering sensor in when you pry that U-joint off the top of that steering sensor shaft. That thing was not budging when I pulled it loose. Trying to knock it free. Nothing was doing it. But leaving a couple of bolts in, just a few threads, and then just using a pry bar on that U-joint, just popped it right off and made it significantly easier. So that's pretty much all there is to it. It's not a terrible job. If you have any questions or comments, post those below. I'll try and get to them as quickly as I can. Hopefully this video is useful for you. And if so, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, hit the notification bell and stuff as I try and add more content. You know, your interaction with with our videos and stuff is the lifeblood of a YouTuber like myself. So anything you can do to help along the way is certainly appreciated. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time here on Rough Riders, and have a good time.